Jake, Stephen A. Smith, Brian Windhorst, Shams Charania, Courtney Cronin with you on a Thursday. Day one of the men's NCAA tournament is here. We're going to get into the brackets, the upsets, the Final Four hopefuls in just a little bit. But we start with some breaking news, Shams, in the NBA. What more can you tell us?
Courtney, sources tell me that Detroit Pistons star Cade Cunningham has been diagnosed with a collapsed lung. He's expected to miss an extended period of time for the Pistons, and there is some optimism internally within the Pistons that he's going to be able to come back for the playoffs, but still not sure about next steps. Cade Cunningham, the Pistons medical staff, they still have to continue to evaluate him, figure out next steps, treatment plans for him. And the one thing I did find out in the last few minutes, doctors do believe it's a mild case, so they're going to continue here to figure out how soon or how much time he could miss. CJ McCollum has had a collapsed lung on 2 different occasions. He missed 3 weeks once, 6 weeks another time. So it's going to be at least a period of weeks here. But this is someone that obviously has led the Pistons to the #1 seed, the 3.5-game lead they have on the Boston Celtics, potentially being without him for a significant period of time here.
Well, first of all, first things first, wishing him nothing but the best and a full and healthy recovery. That's the priority right now. Obviously, anytime you hear something like that, it scares the living hell out of you. Making sure you're all right. You're thinking about a collapsed lung. You're of the mindset. What happened? What kind of collision took place? What kind of impact took place that actually, caused that to happen? And then you saw some of the highlights and you see how it could have easily had a team that's perceived as having a bona fide, a viable secondary scoring option. He is the offense. Everything goes through him. Other people are going to have to step up, no doubt about that. You don't expect them to fall off a cliff, but the Boston Celtics are ascending. The Boston Celtics are coming. The New York Knicks are still in the mix. And obviously, this is something that could potentially cost them the #1 seed in the Eastern Conference. Is it that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things? One could argue not so fast, because if he eventually comes back, they could still do some things, even though they play a second-round series and they'd probably be the road team instead of the home team. Who knows? But it's one of those situations where, let's be very, very clear, the Detroit Pistons and all of its championship aspirations, it goes nowhere without this man. This man isn't back, ready to play, healthy enough and ready to go. The Detroit Pistons' chances of winning the championship go right out the window with him. We don't anticipate that'll happen. Thank the good Lord that he's going to be okay. And eventually, whether it's 3 to 6 weeks or sooner, he'll be back. But in the end, Detroit's success rides with this man. He is that superstar. He is that dude on their squad. And they need him if they're going to ascend to a championship level. Let's get that out the way right now.
Yeah, so as someone who's had a rib injury, it's extremely painful. You saw the play here. Trey Johnson accidentally knees him in the side. It's a freak injury. Typically with the collapsed lung, like, you can't even travel for a while. I remember about 15 years ago, Gerald Wallace with the Bobcats had a collapsed lung after a flagrant foul by Andrew Bynum in Los Angeles, and the way he got back to Charlotte was by bus. He took 3 days to travel across the country because you can't fly for a while. So that's one thing. The other thing you have to wonder is, how serious was a rib injury here? Because sometimes collapsed lungs are caused by rib damage, sometimes they're not. So there's the dynamics of that for sure. The Pistons do have a 4-game lead in the loss column on the Celtics. That's a decent cushion for 14 games left. They have had some success without him this year. I'm not as worried about them with the seeding. I would believe they could hold them off. But Stephen A., you're of course right. The truth is, this man is an MVP candidate. You are not going to survive long in a playoff series if not only he's not back, but he's not back and playing at a high level. And we're just not going to know probably right now what his situation is. But this is why, you can't take anything for granted in March and April and May in the NBA. There's always these variables. And one piece of business, this seems trivial, but I should just point it out because it does affect people care about. Cade has played 60 games. He would need to get to 65 to reach any sort of award situations.
Yes.
Not sure that's going to happen. So that's
not going to happen
also as well.
Yeah.
So 44-17 with him this season, Shams. 5-2 without Cade Cunningham. Do we have any clarity on how and when this might have happened?
So, it could be as innocuous as that play that we saw where he dove and he was clearly hit. So I'm not exactly sure when it happened. It could have easily happened here, like Stephen A. said. These are moments.
He left the game after this play.
Yeah.
I would, we don't know for sure, but that was very, most likely that's the play.
With back spasms, and this is certainly something Brian said he had this. This is something that does impact a lot of the upper body. So certainly the back is a part of that. The Pistons are still doing tests on it, seeing what else is there. What they know right now, collapsed lung. Doctors believe it's a mild case, and that's what they're operating on. And so they're optimistic that he's going to be able to have treatment and a plan here in place for him to be back in the playoffs. But again, there is a lot of uncertainty still here moving forward. So wish him the best in his rehab.
Well, a lot of moving parts here. We'll make sure to be checking in with you on the latest on this. Thank you for joining us to get things off right off the bat. All right, let's move.
News, quite frankly.
We were talking about a player of his, magnitude, and when you're talking about a collapsed lung, that's scary. This isn't an ankle sprain. This isn't something that you just ice and get better. So this is something to do with his breathing and his, so this is definitely not good. I do take the word mild, like you kind of emphasized there, on maybe that there's some hope that he can return for a couple games left in the regular season and gear up for the playoffs, but this is a huge blow to a team. We talk about the MVP and the most valuable player to that team, and I think all year long that's been Cade Cunningham, and I've been consistent with what I've said. I think this is a very, very good team, clearly the #1 seed in the Eastern Conference. With him, we don't know what this team's like without him, and this is going to be a real test, these next couple weeks, depending on how long he's actually out. But, where does that playmaking come from? Where does the ball handling come from? Where does the scoring come from? As good as Jalen Duren is, he's not really that feed the post kind of guy and let him eat. Tobias Harris, guys like Jenkins, they're going to, Karis LeVert, there's going to be some guys that are going to have some opportunity here to really, kind of help, lead this offense to get some points. I don't know where it's going to come from without Cade Cunningham. So I hope it's not that serious. I hope he's back because it's been such a great season for him individually, for this team, for JB Bickerstaff, and now without him in the lineup, man, the Eastern Conference is more wide open than it ever even was in the beginning.
I guess the difference, mild, Lou, and it's mild, if that's what this is, it heals on its own versus anything worse than that requires some sort of intervention, surgical, what have you. But I was shocked to hear this morning, Lou. What was your reaction?
So he's going to have to wait it out and wait until his body decides to heal itself. I'm wishing Cade a speedy recovery. And everything like that. Hope he gets back on his feet and he returns to form that we've grown accustomed to. But we've been harping on this all year long as far as the basketball side of this goes. They need a secondary scorer. They need a secondary guy that you can put the ball in their hands and they can get you to the promised land. And right now, they have a lot of guys that can play by committee, but who's going to step outside of that crowd and be the guy that they need to be that scoring punch, be that leader, and try to get them through this course without Cade Cunningham being in the lineup. And so that's going to be tough. The timing of it is awful for them, them being 3.5 games up on Boston, but Boston being in a good run, Cade Cunningham going out. You don't want this season to blow up in your face. You don't want to be the #1 seed in the East all year long, only to have, early playoff struggles because your best player is out. So the timing on this couldn't be any worse. But at the end of the day, you want to see somebody get back and be healthy and be themselves. But, it's not good news for Detroit at this point.
No, it's especially given that we know that Boston is now officially a monster in the East. They've already had some doubters start to creep up as far as what they can do in the playoffs. Let me ask you this. I don't want to be too dramatic and extreme here, but if he is out or if he's out for an extended period of time, is there a potential where they're a first round out at this point?
Unfortunately, there is. And again, I don't want to be dramatic, and I don't think that is dramatic. We know how good this team is with Cade Cunningham, but he is putting up an MVP-type season, and he does what no one else on this roster can do. You look around the great teams that have the depth that we talked about yesterday with OKC and San Antonio, it's next man up. There's so many different playmakers. They have so many different ball handlers that can create offense, that can run an offense, run a team. The Detroit Pistons aren't built like that. They are built on a toughness, and they have an identity, and they defend, and they're physical, and they have Cade Cunningham. And so it's going to be very, very interesting. And my eyes are like this if I'm in that Eastern Conference play-in, because now it goes from, okay, we have to play this, goony, really good team and the #1 seed to now, okay, if we happen to get that 8 seed or 7 seed, if Boston hunts them down this next 14 games, now there's hope. If I'm Atlanta, if I'm Philly, and I'm fully healthy going into that series against Detroit Pistons without Cade Cunningham, I fully think we can beat them. So This is awful news for Detroit. I hope he's better because I don't want this season to be sour. I don't want it to end this way. Again, everything that they've did last year to now has been so exceptional. I hate for it to end this way, and I do take the word mild. I don't take that lightly. I'm hopeful that this is just kind of a week to 2 week thing. And there's been some players in the past that have only missed 5, 6, 7 games, which is great news. But this is also something you don't want to rush back if you're the Pistons and this is your franchise player and you just paid him a boatload of money. So it's interesting. But yeah, if I'm in that Eastern Conference play-in, I don't want to say stoked about another guy's injury, but I'm hopeful.
Different.
I'm hopeful for sure.
Guys with this injury, CJ McCollum being one of them in the past, it's ranged from 2 weeks to 6 weeks on how long it took for them to get better. You know what? We're running into it, Lou. We sort of waited to see the 65-game rule threshold, what would happen, who would suffer because of it. Well, it looks like Cade Cunningham is about to be a victim because if he needs 5 more to basically be out of this thing, it looks like he's going to miss those. So he can't make first team all NBA. This will be a discussion now about this 65-game rule. Does it make you sort of look at it like, let's change it, let's tweak it?
Yeah, and unfortunately, we need cases like this where we can address it, right? We've been complaining about this for a few years now when this was implemented. Like, it's a legitimate injury. You can't punish a guy for having a legitimate injury. I know that this was put in to address a lot of the low management stuff that we were trying to figure out and guys sitting out games when they were perfectly healthy. But this is legitimate. And so you can't really put, the onus on Cade Cunningham for having, actual injuries and things like that. And now it's going to cost him probably some money with some incentives in his contract. It's going to cost him some of his respect. It's going to cost him some of his legacy. These things matter. And so you hate to see it come down to this, but it definitely needs to be addressed, definitely need to be discussed. There is a gray area when it comes to this 65-game threshold that the NBA has put into place. And this is going to be a case study. This is going to be something that needs to be discussed, and they're going to use this situation for that to be discussed. And so I'm curious to see what happens and what comes of it, but something needs to change when it comes to the 65-game minimum rule.
Yeah, and because you can't convince me that he's not